So today we're doing something a little bit different. We are going to be sort of doing a panel. We got some people coming up here, grabbing some chairs. And we're going to be answering some questions that people have asked. Okay, I'm going to use my phone instead. But we're going to be answering some questions people have asked. This is on. You guys can pass it around. We have some people up here who are in the middle of mental health struggles or on the other side of mental health struggles. These people are not experts or professionals. These are you guys. These are people who are in the midst of figuring it out. And so we wanted to get people who would sort of share their stories and their experiences and maybe use those to encourage us, things that we can relate to, things that we can understand. So first off, I think everybody knows everybody's names, but can you guys just share what your name is and what mental health struggles or issues or traumas have you guys been through at a very high level, just so we understand where you're coming from?
Yeah, I'm Evelyn. I've struggled with depression, anxiety, and then some suicidal thoughts and traumatic memories.
I'm Adam, and I've gone through a pretty rough breakup somewhat recently and a lot of relationship struggles in the past several years that led up to that, as well as some like situational depression and some other things like that. You know, of course, anxiety plays a part, especially at school, so yeah.
I'm Alyssa. I have struggled with anxiety, depression, panic attacks, and suicidal thoughts.
Awesome. Hopefully you guys are starting to see that some of the things that you're struggling with are not unique to you. We all struggle with a lot of the same things. We've had people up here share in their sermons how much they have struggled with various things. So we're going to get into some questions for you guys and kind of off the cuff and see where this goes. Hopefully the questions aren't really specific to this one kind of situation. They're more generic and broad, so the goal would be for whatever your specific struggles might be, or experiences, or friends you have and what struggles they might be going through and ways that you want to help them. It's broad enough that we would get stuff from those, but specific enough that they would be really useful things. So let's just go ahead and kick things off and be able to use as much of the time as we can. How can you tell, I'm going to turn more towards you guys, how can you tell when you're experiencing a totally normal amount and type of anxiety, stress, melancholy, sadness, and when you're experiencing something that is a more serious mental health issue? For you guys, how do you tell the difference between this is just a normal thing and this is a problem?
For me, at first, I've been struggling with this for as long as I could tell, for as long as I could remember. It's really hard to tell. The biggest thing is that it's like the three-legged stool. You pray about it, accountability, and you read your Bible. And if it just keeps nagging at you, and I would, of course, I'm up here and my mind just goes blank. I don't know if you guys can.
Yeah,
You have something to say?
Sure. I was just going to say, I think if you were to talk to a doctor or something, oftentimes they would say, it's like, is it interfering with your everyday life? Is it making it really difficult to go to classes? Is it making it difficult to get up and go to church? But honestly, I think the best thing you can do is just have a conversation with someone about it. And maybe it is just a really little thing and then you feel better, but there's no reason not to reach out and then bounce that off someone. And maybe they can say, yeah, it sounds like it's just a hard time, like you got this. Or they might say, yeah, it sounds like this is something you might want to talk to someone else about, or you might want to try this or try that.
I just want to just add to that and say that like some of the normal stuff is you're going to want to talk to other people about it. So a sign of like wanting to talk to other people about it isn't necessarily like, oh, this is, a depression issue. But definitely the idea of like, if it's interfering with your daily life, if you're sitting there, for example, doing school homework, or you're at work at the office at your desk or mowing the lawn or whatever, and you just can't get the thoughts out of your head, and they're mostly negative and just negative thoughts, or they just pop into your mind, I think that's when it's like interfering with your job. It's interfering with your sleep schedule. You can't sleep. You're staying up late. And even if you talk to other people, it's still happening. That's an issue.
Yeah. Do you address those issues similarly or differently when it's just, this is my normal run-of-the-mill stress, anxiety, depression, or this is a real problem? Do those get addressed similar? You don't have to talk about necessarily how we do that. We'll go into that a little bit. But are they similar or different?
Well, I guess when you figure out that there's a difference between like, oh, this is a normal everyday struggle, or there's something deeper going on, I think my reaction is, I don't think I reach out very often to people whenever I'm just sad. Like I might tell somebody, it's like, yeah, I'm just not having a great day, but I'll be okay. Mm-hmm. But whenever I realize like this is an issue, I will text somebody very close to me, and I'll be like, hey, I need a friend. I need somebody to lean on right now. And I think that's the primary difference for me on like how I address that.
Cool. Yeah. Sort of that load burden thing. Is this a load that I'm just going to carry myself, and I might still talk to other people about it, or is this a burden where I need help and I need to talk to somebody? I like that. So is there a step-by-step process or a formula that you follow when you are addressing a mental health struggle? Is there sort of okay, I know I'm in the middle of it, what do I do now?
Each problem is going to be different. There's not going to be one formula for everything. I think the biggest thing is going to be not just crawling back into your shell, and that's always going to be the natural instinct. I mean, for years, that is what I did. And I had the most amazing support system. My family kept reaching out, even though I didn't, I ignored that support. And that is the most important thing that you can do. I don't know.
So step one is reach out.
Yeah, reach out.
I'll tell you what I don't want to do, but what I do end up doing most of the time is I will kind of, like what she said, go into my shell. What does that look like? Well, sometimes I'll kind of get addicted to that feeling of releasing that emotion, I guess. Because oftentimes when I am depressed, it'll be like a lack of emotion. So if I can feel that sadness for whatever reason, if I'm by myself, I'll listen to a sad song or something like that. You know what I mean? Like I'm by myself and I'm perpetuating the negative emotions just because I can feel those negative emotions. And that's not healthy at all. But I will choose that over taking active steps to just get better and be happy and choose to have a good attitude about things. Typically, I need other people to bring me out of that. If I'm just try to go it alone, there's a certain kind of pride aspect that goes with that, where I'm like, okay, I can get through this by myself. I'll just need to wait it out, and I'll just be sad, or just be numb, and be by myself and go on lone walks. Sometimes the lone walks are good, and you need to think through things. But my thing is, I need to reach out. That is step one. Step two would be actually like listen to what those people have to say, and then pray about it for sure. Abide and read the word and pray about it, because that should be step one, but sometimes it's not that easy, and you need that push, and God can use other people to do it.
The only thing I would add is if you've gone through all those things, and especially if people are kind of advising it, you can look at a therapist. They're really good at pointing out the next direction to go and like a certain type of treatment. If it's anxiety, they can walk you through grounding exercises. There's lots of different things that can help a lot, and sometimes it's not things that you would realize on your own. So it's kind of 3 different steps you can go through, I guess.
Tying 2 of those things together real quick, Adam, you mentioned the listening to sad songs when you're sad because you want to feel more sad. That was something I brought up with my therapist actually at one point, and she said that's because there's a misalignment with your head and your heart and your thoughts and your feelings, and you want to bring those 2 into alignment. And that clicked something in my brain because your heart is feeling a certain way, so you listen to sad music to get your brain more sad. But we could do the opposite of that and realize, oh, we're in that misalignment. Let me try to pull my heart up rather than pulling my brain down. Alyssa, I want to expand on something that you mentioned, ask you a follow-up there. You talked about the importance of going out because we want to withdraw into our shell. Are there times when it is the right answer for us to withdraw into our shell? That's a lot of times our natural reaction to things. Are there times when, for this kind of mental health struggle or for this place that you're in, it'd be really good if you isolated and withdrew and just kind of got alone?
Yes. Sometimes you definitely need to recharge. For me, there were definitely times where, and even still now, I cannot, I have days where there's just too much people contact. And sometimes that comes on quicker than others. And that was one of the main factors in my panic attacks. And many of you know Axel. He is now retired, but he was my service dog. And he would alert me to when I was going to have a panic attack. And if I didn't listen to him, then that would happen. But if I didn't recharge, that would happen more often.
So knowing your limits, knowing your boundaries, but trying to fight against that instinct all the time, trying to find that balance. Cool. So these are sort of the processes that you guys have for when you're struggling. What if there's somebody else in your life that you care about, that you're close to, who is struggling with something? How do you go about helping that person when they're in the midst of a mental health struggle or situation?
Well, the first thing is to listen to them. I think we want to help them by telling them about our story, and that can make things worse. That can feel like we're trying to almost like we're trying to compete or match their struggle, and it can push them away. But often all they want is just to be heard.
I would say for kind of struggles that I've struggled with, I've always really appreciated it when, rather than me having to take that step to reach out, when my friends reach out and they're like, hey, I haven't heard from you in a while, or hey, I've noticed you got some dark circles under your eyes. You doing okay? Yeah. And that is so nice. Like nothing will get me emotional faster than a good friend coming up to me and be like, hey, I love you, bro. Like you should talk to me. Like, let's go get lunch, or let's talk. And I want to hear what's on your mind. And I'm just like, that's the coolest thing ever. I need that in my life. And whenever I'm stuck in my negative thoughts about how, I might be worthless, or I might be not enough, or that my friends do, or I don't have any friends that really care that much, and then somebody goes and does that, it sets those negative thoughts aside. And it reminds me, God is looking out for me, and he really does use people around me for that. So if you see someone who might be struggling, I think the best thing to do would be like, it's okay to say, hey, I noticed you're not doing so hot. How are you feeling? How are you doing? Do you want to talk? Sometimes they don't want to. And that's okay. You just got to ask. I think asking is important. And then, of course, listen. That is also number one. But if advice is warranted, then do your best to point them to God more than your own personal experience, because we all make mistakes. Everybody's situation is different, but God stays the same in every situation.
Yeah, I like what Chris said last week about asking in the conversation, are you looking for a fix or a feel? Do you want help, a solution? Do you want me to try to do, or do you just want somebody to listen and be there? And then also recognizing that there are other times when they don't want to talk, like you said, but still finding a way to be there for them and just sit. I've definitely had one-on-ones with people where we're at lunch and it's just they're in the middle of a hard thing right now, and I don't have a thing to say to them, and they don't want to talk about it, and so we just sit, and we're just there together. And sometimes just being a person for somebody and just saying, I don't have anything to say, I'm not trying to fix it, and I don't even need you to talk about it. I'm just going to be here for you can be really big. Cool. These are great ideas. Thank you. Quick for us up here, raise your hand if you have done or gone to therapy. Cool. Oh. Counseling. Okay, yeah, sure. Close enough. Great. So some questions about therapy. How do you find a good therapist? Do they have to be a Christian? How do you know if a therapist is a good one once you've met with them? Red flags, green flags. What has been your experience with therapy, finding a therapist, finding a good one, that sort of thing?
So right now I have a Christian therapist, and I really appreciate that aspect. I think you wouldn't have to have a Christian therapist as long as you avoid the major red flag of any kind of advice. Any kind of advice that points you away from God or towards sin, because that's kind of the big concern with a non-Christian therapist. In terms of finding one, sometimes you have to try a couple. A Christian one might be an easier match, in all honesty, because at least you're starting with that. But the first meeting, it's totally fine to have a first meeting and realize, we're not really jiving together. Not everyone is for every person, and it might be because, there's a big value misalignment, or it might just be their style doesn't work with me. So you meet them in the first thing. It's kind of almost like a tryout, the first session. You're just learning about each other. You're seeing if the situation works for each other, and then if you like it, you can keep trying it. And if you don't, you can get off, you can find someone else. If you're looking for like exact how to help, I know the school does have a lot of resources that they'll match you with. If you're out of school, there's online options, like BetterHelp is an online solution that I use that'll allow you to do video visits and just has a huge, huge database. So yeah, I think that's my advice.
Do you want to? Okay. I would just say my limited experience with counseling was good. It was eye-opening. I didn't attend super many sessions, but I will say, like, before you reach that point of like trying to reach a therapist, I would say talk to like your mentorship in church, and then talk to your pastor, see what they have to say, because sometimes what they have to say is enough. You know, that sometimes the guidance that they have is what you need. But if truly what you need is professional help, then do not be afraid to pursue that. That is important. I did it because I, at the time, didn't have a church to go to. And I was looking for some kind of pastoral leadership. And so I referred to a Christian counselor who was a pastor. Mm-hmm. And so that would be my advice to y'all, since you do have church leadership, you do have pastors, to reach out to them first and see what they have to say. They may refer you to a therapist, but see what they have to say.
I am not currently in therapy, but the therapist that I saw for about 5 years, she was not a Christian. But within the first few sessions, I made it very clear to her my beliefs, and she respected that. And if she didn't, then I probably would have found another therapist. However, we clicked as patient and therapist pretty well, and that is probably the main advice that I would give you, is to make sure that you are comfortable with your therapist. And if you don't feel comfortable talking to your therapist, then obviously they're not a good fit for you. It really is difficult finding a therapist or psychiatrist, doctor. There are not many, especially in this area, that are good or at all. So it can work not having a Christian therapist. So.
Cool. That's great. Do you feel like therapy is sort of a quick fix solution? Is it self-centered to try to talk to somebody and like, let me think about me and how my brain works and try to solve my problems by looking inward? Do you feel like it's a replacement for discipleship, scripture, listening to the Holy Spirit? There are thoughts that therapy is trying to shortcut the hard work of spiritual warfare and like actually battling. Do you guys feel like that has been true in your experience? That's an attempt to dodge those things and be self-centered and quick fix? And
it is absolutely not a quick fix. It is the opposite. You can, it is self-centered in the way that you have to look at yourself and the issues that you are dealing with and the things that are in your brain. It is your mental health that you're dealing with. And I mean, I don't know if there's anything else.
I would say it's kind of tough sometimes to help other people when you're struggling with the same thing. So in the core, we say stuff like, get yourself squared away before you help others, right? And I think that's a little bit of an aspect there is, you know, if you want to share the gospel, you'd better read the gospel. If you want to help other people with mental health stuff, you better at least try to get yourself better that way too, lest you fall into traps. And there was something on the tip of my tongue while you were talking about that in my experience with counseling,
Sure. Yeah. I think if you go into counseling thinking all I have to do is talk to my therapist and then I'll be better, you're going to be in kind of for a rude awakening. Therapy is a tool and it gives you tools for stuff like spiritual battles, for mental health struggles. But you always need to do it in the context of these are tools that are going to help me in my whole process of getting closer to God and understanding the scriptures more and coming to God faster. I think this is a similar thing with medication, it can definitely help. And sometimes I think it's really needed, but it shouldn't be the final thing you do. It's a tool to help you to be able to do the practices, the spiritual disciplines, reading your Bible, praying, seeing people, going to church, all this stuff. And I found that when I am able to use those tools, it makes those things easier. So if I'm just struggling without any outside help, it can be really hard to have the discipline to read my Bible and have the bravery to reach out to people. But when I have all these tools, it can make that spiritual journey easier. So if you're using that as the end, you're going to struggle. But as long as you see it as a tool to help you on that path, then I think it can be really, really a difference. Yeah.
Yeah, it's kind of basically what you just said, but also a little different. So I think therapy or counseling is every bit as valid as like cold medicine. Like you're taking cold medicine to get rid of a cold, like you're gonna try to take care of your mental health. I think there's a lot of people who don't understand mental health can be kind of like a sickness in a way. You know, it just kind of comes upon you, and then what are you gonna do about it? When you have a cold, what do? You just try to go about your daily life and do the same stuff? Or do you lay in bed? Do you drink tea? Do you take allergy medicine or whatever? It's kind of the same thing. But like you said, it shouldn't be the only means. Reaching out to a professional is in addition to prayer, fellowship, reading the word. It is not supposed to be a replacement. Even if the counselor or therapist is a Christian, in my experience with counseling, I was trying to, I didn't have church leadership at the time, so I was using that as my sole basis of like fellowship and all that stuff, and it was not enough. It was not what I was looking for. He was a professional. He was looking to diagnose me if he needed to. That's not what happens when you engage in fellowship. Like your friend at church is not looking to diagnose you or try to give you medicine or anything like that. They're just there to listen and be God's servant in your life, right? And so even if your therapist or counselor is a Christian too, just remember that they have a job to do, and they're there to help you and give you the tools you need, but it's a different set of tools than what you would get from the other pursuits, the three-legged stool, as Alyssa was talking about.
I really like that. I totally agree with you guys. It's a piece. I think about the cereal commercials that we all watched growing up, and it's this part of a balanced breakfast. There's the rest of the balanced breakfast is the discipleship and scripture reading and fellowship, and it doesn't replace those things. But it's also not a quick fix. It's the slow fix. The quick fix is anytime I'm feeling bad or stressed or anxious, I'm just going to pray and then white knuckle my way through life. That's a quick fix, is just not fixing it at all. The slow fix is I'm going to try to figure out what's going on. But it definitely is, absolutely a part of a bigger thing.
Can I add something real quick?
Definitely.
I would say the quick fix would also be things like alcohol.
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
drugs,
Numbing
and
the
things like
pain.
that. Those are the quick fixes.
And
for
then,
sure.
and things like I'm gonna work out in excess to feel better. I'm gonna play video games in excess just to
forbidden
distract
tree.
my brain, and absolutely anything we're avoiding that.
I don't know, there's a balance here, because, you know, Dr. Gregory is one of the renowned leaders in psychiatry in the country, and his concern is that sometimes medication is considered to be the quick fix. So
Absolutely.
he has a lot of procedures that he's won awards for that take a lot of work
Yeah.
in therapy, and yet people would rather have a pill that fixes it. So
Right.
I think that just that concept of quick fix is not so much the therapy side,
Right.
as it's the, let's just medicate the kid quick. Let's just medicate the
Absolutely
kid
can
quick
be,
so
yeah.
we can calm down so we can do so we can. So I think
Yeah.
that's, and I think Evelyn's answer is the right one, is it is a part of a process,
Mm-hmm.
but we're the most medicated country in time in history, and the problems aren't going away.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Because we're not willing to do the long, hard therapy work. Or the
Yeah.
discussion.
And medication can play a role. We're not trying to demonize that, but also we don't want medication to be thought of as this is the solution. It will fix all of your problems. This is the first thing you should go to, sort of thing. It is a piece just like therapy, just like all the other things. So that's a great addition. So when you're in the middle of a struggle, when you're in a really dark time, how do you personally try to see to the other side? How do you try to have hope that it gets better? How do you look ahead at all? How do you, a lot of times we want to shell up and look down and look inward, and how do you try to lift your head up and go, okay, it can get better?
So I think in the darkest place, it is really, really difficult to find hope within yourself. And this is something that I would encourage you, the more you go through this and you get to the other side, it gets a little bit easier to be like, okay, I know there is another side. I've been there before. But honestly, I think sometimes the only way to catch hope is to catch it from somebody else. So this idea of reaching out to people and sharing your struggle is really important. But I think also just being around other people, I don't think there's anything wrong with, hey, I'm having a really hard time. Can we, go hang out together? Can we go take a walk together? Can we go to a movie together? Being around people helps so much. And it can be the hardest thing sometimes, but for me, it's really been the only thing. And especially if you're struggling with any kind of like self-harm, suicidal thoughts, like get around people as much as you possibly can. You can talk to them, you can hang out with them. Their laughing and laughing back and forth is gonna help you feel that spark of hope, and you can catch it from people. And that's really the only thing for me that has worked in those really dark times.
The common phrase is like there's light at the end of the tunnel, but like if you've ever been in a cave alone or to that extent where there is no light, someone can say, yeah, there is light at the end of the tunnel, but where is the end of the tunnel? Like you have no idea and you can't see it and you really don't know. So that's kind of the analogy of like when you're in that little dark space, somebody can tell you, oh yeah, there's light, it'll be okay. But you're like, yeah, sure, okay. You really don't know that. I find my comfort in those situations in Christ. And that's always been my way of doing it, is just prayer. I can be okay with there being no light in the tunnel at all if Christ is there with me. Because he can be my light. Sometimes there's no point in thinking about, oh, it's going to get better, or the future's like, there's better times in the future, because as long as we're in this life on earth, there will be bad times too. And so anytime when I'm in that dark place, I'm thinking, oh, it'll get better. Well, it'll also get worse. And then it'll get better again, but it'll also get worse. In fact, throughout my life, I've been getting stronger. These things make me stronger, and so therefore I go through harder trials. So actually, the real promise is, while I live this life, it's actually going to get a lot worse than it is right now. And that's not a comforting thought. So the thought of, oh, it's going to get better, that does not help. But prayer in the moment, knowing that I'm going through this trial with someone who's so far greater, and me leaving this life in the future with Christ, is a much more comforting thought, and it allows me to not focus on the future or the past, but the present. And yeah, I'm in this darkness, but I have him. And that's where I get my comfort.
For me, like there was a period of time where I could not leave my apartment, like to like even to go and be around anybody. But I mean, so I mean, Axel would be there, Matt would be there, but just my dog doing some little stupid thing would make me smile or give me some just little tiny bit of hope, or I would have to get up in the morning to let him go outside. It's not like I'm not a people person. So just something like that, even if it's just like putting a small piece of color on a wall that you like, any little bit of something that will just bring you joy, bring you just a little bit of something that makes you smile or something.
Can I clarify? Go ahead. I'm so sorry. I just would like to clarify something real quick. I didn't mean that in the sense of like things will never get better. I meant that in the mindset when you're in the darkness, the idea of, oh, things will get better isn't always the comforting thought.
It's really hard, yeah.
That doesn't mean that your life can't get better or that the struggles you'll go through in the future can't be easier. That's just the mindset you're in at that moment.
It's a good clarification.
I kind of have a final thought. We heard a couple different ways that can help, and I think finding your way that helps you is really important. And then the important thing and the kind of rubber meets the road thing is you have to really, really try. When in those times, it's so much easier to withdraw, to curl up, to just bask in that sadness. It's like, and there's going to be times when you try and you can't. And then next time you have to try every single time, whether or not you fall down, whether or not you get back up. I think just making that commitment to yourself, like every time I feel these feelings or think these thoughts, I'm going to try to do the thing that helps me.
Cool. Great answers, yeah. How do you guys personally struggle with your flesh when it makes it harder to obey God? So sometimes our brains and our own struggles make it so that we want to not trust God and not obey Him, not do the things that we think we should. How do you fight against that? How do you wrestle with that? I mentioned in my sermon, just the way that your brain works doesn't make you sinful, but how do you sort of keep those natural tendencies from turning into sin?
Happens a lot. So I think one thing is like, you probably will. Everybody's imperfect. You probably will turn to some sort of sin. For me, I eat when I'm stressed or depressed or something like that. I get that short-term gratification. It's just one example. I'll eat a lot, and that's not good. It's not good for you. It's gluttony. It's just not good. Porn has also been an issue in the past, but like any kind, it could be alcohol, it could be drugs, it could be anything like that. You need to have grace for yourself, because the negative thoughts are going to perpetuate a downward spiral of continuing to ignore God and ignore the proper ways to go down. So God has grace on you, right? He says, He forgave you already for those things. Especially, if you're saved, you're done with that. But you need to forgive yourself, because if you have these negative thoughts, it's just going to keep perpetuating it. So just remember that if you do fall into a trap of some kind, just forgive yourself and say, tomorrow's another day. Or even the next hour is another hour. You know what I mean? It doesn't have to be tomorrow. Like, it could be, okay, well, yeah, I just ate 8 bags of popcorn and, you know, just didn't do all my homework, and I'm just sitting here staring at the wall for the past 3 hours. I just wasted a bunch of time. Well, okay, well, that was the last 3 hours. This is a new minute. I can forgive myself for making that mistake and move forward because I have that freedom. You know, God has provided that freedom for me. So, yeah, just have grace on yourself. Don't be so hard on yourself, I think, is one thing. And then, yeah, actually, it's going to take effort. And sometimes you're not going to have that energy to try, but you have to.
There have been things like I've told people in my life that, like, if I do this, like, I have people in my life looking out for me. They're holding me accountable for certain things. I've given them permission to, like, to just like slap me in the face, quote unquote, kind of thing. So just have people in your life to hold you accountable for stuff.
Great. Beautiful. So how do you feel like you can bring up your struggles to somebody else? Is there a sort of temptation to avoid making it someone else's problem? You know, I'm struggling. I don't want to burden them with anything. How do you fight against that and have that balance? What could that conversation look like when you're struggling? You want to go to somebody. How do you bring that up? How do you fight against those things?
I think the first battle is a little bit in your own head of this idea of, oh, either it's going to make their day so much harder or it's going to make them think so much less of me. So, and those are both lies. As someone who's both been reached out to and reached out, like, it's a very beautiful thing to be asked, to hear someone's story. It can be a life-giving thing. A lot of the people up here are really, really good at that. Like, they love to be able to help people, to share with people. And they're adults, so you don't have to feel like you have to worry so much about their own health. If it's trouble, you can have a conversation with it. You can say, you know, I don't want you to take this on. I just want to share with you. I think it's important to not stake you're getting better on that person. See it as a resource. It's going to be a conversation. They might point you to a next step, but it's not the end of your journey. So once you're able to fight that battle in your mind, just sending someone a message. I think it's good to give some context, not just, hey, can we hang out, but something like, hey, I've been really struggling recently. I could use someone to talk it over with. Would you be up for that? What's a time that would work for you, kind of thing, is a really good to do it. And then when you're there, you can share with them, you can hear their advice, and I think as long as you're still taking responsibility for your own self, you don't really need to worry about that whole, like, oh, it's unfair to them. Yeah.
Sounds good to me.
Yeah.
Okay. Now switch places. Someone has just shared something really hard with you. How do you help them? How do you help shoulder that burden with them without getting overburdened yourself, without sort of taking that on and getting overwhelmed yourself?
I think you need to give them their agency. In other words, allow them to take it or leave it. Like, if you're going to give advice, you can't stake your own. It's also kind of a pride issue too. Like, if you think, oh, okay, well, I'm going to help this person get through this problem, you cannot take that burden. You cannot think, oh, okay, well, this guy's reaching out to me or this girl's reaching out to me. I'm going to help this person through this. And now what you've done in saying that is you're staking some kind of, like, if they get better, then you have succeeded type situation. So like, oh, I helped them. It's like, no, you're not helping them in the sense of like, okay, you are helping them, but it's not only if they get better, if that makes sense. You are providing them a resource. You are giving them advice, but they still need to take responsibility for their own actions, and you need to allow them to have that responsibility. You can't take responsibility for how they end up. So if they get worse, it's not on you. You know, if they stay the same, it's not on you. You did your part. You need to remember what your role is in that situation, that you are, you know, if you pray about it, especially, God is using you in their life to be a light and be a resource, not to bring them out of their depression. That could happen through the grace of God, but that's not what you should expect. And if you do expect that, you're putting yourself in a really bad position to make your life a whole lot worse.
I think a final thing is there's nothing wrong with realizing this is too much for you to carry. If it's something that either you just have no experience with, it sounds like it's something that needs professional help, or you're just like, this is too overwhelming for me, a great thing you can do is go with that person to somebody who can handle that. Because sometimes that is the help they need right then. But there's no shame in realizing that I can't carry this for this person. I can't fix this for this person. I might need more support.
I think that's massive, is knowing your own limits, knowing what your boundaries are, and being able to say, either right now I'm in a place where this is starting to overwhelm me, or this is a topic that is just so far outside of my depth. I don't know how to give you advice. I don't know how to help you. And being able to, then go with them and try to help connect them with somebody who might, hey, maybe you could go talk to Tony. I think he has some more experience with this. Or, hey, let's see if we can find you a therapist. That might be helpful. And but knowing your boundaries is really important in that. Those are the questions that I had. Do you guys have any questions that you've thought of during this time that you would like to ask our lovely panelists? Totally okay if you don't. Yeah.
So I think like this one's for like all you guys obviously, but like in a lot of ways.
So do we feel like it's sometimes we want to avoid the look of, I shouldn't be struggling with this because I'm a Christian. How do we overcome that thought? That's great. Yeah.
It is really hard. It's something that's extremely difficult for me. I have to majorly psych myself up to reach out to someone. And I think if we can notice that pride and we can say like, okay, we know pride isn't from God, and we can take a stand against that on purpose, that helps a lot. It does help to see other people be vulnerable, which is I think why we do a lot of this kind of stuff. But I think there are oftentimes issues. Maybe it's something you even really prided yourself in, like, no, I am a great this person. I'm always great at this thing. Then all of a sudden you're struggling with that. And it's like you don't want people to not think of you as great at that thing, or you don't want to lose your status as this or that, or you don't want someone to look down on you, change your mind about you. It's a real worry. It gets better with time. The first time is the worst when you reach out to someone. And then you realize, like, oh, they don't see me something different, as anything different at all. Matter of fact, a lot of times people walk away with much more respect for what you're going through. And it helps to think, like, if this was my best friend, would I say, no, don't share that? They'll think something bad about you. No, you want your friend to get help, and sometimes we have to be friends for ourselves.
I just want to expand a little bit on the whole more respect thing. I think if you swallowing your pride is tough, but if you gear your life towards a life of being more genuine and open with people, I think you'll find that people will respect you more. And your ego is hungry for that kind of stuff. And I'm not saying feed your ego, but what I am saying is the quick fixes of just not telling people and pretending, that's what your ego wants. Your ego wants the fast, I want respect now. And you got to know what's best for yourself in that regard, is not the respect now, so I'm going to go, splash water on my face and pretend that I'm super good at this. You need to reach out to somebody and actually get good at this. You know what I mean? Actually put the time and effort into it so that, and then once people have seen, oh, you have overcome that, oh, you have struggled through that, they'll have far more respect for you in that regard. So if that is a motivating factor for you to reach out, then you can use that motivating factor. But in the end, it's still kind of a pride, I want to be respected kind of motivating factor. And I think in the end, it's all about being honest, being open, and you should want to overcome these issues so that you can help others overcome that issue. It shouldn't just be I want to be respected type situation.
One of the things to think about within that is you got two sins there, not sins, but two struggles there.
Yeah.
One is pride and the other is depression. Which one am I going to open up and deal with and talk
Sure.
to people about? And so you might want to say, in terms of, there's not a hierarchy per se, although humility and pride are pretty high up there. And okay, well, let's work on humility at this point, and that's going to include working on the depression.
I was going to say, if you just have humility, that's working on both at the same time.
Yeah.
And so if you have the humility to reach out to somebody, you're both swallowing your pride and you are trying to work on that depression issue. So.
Cool. I think we might have time for one more question if there is one. If not, that's fine. But if anybody had another question.
I kind of just thought about sometimes there's lines on the line of what that looks like.
So if there's somebody who is struggling with something and they haven't necessarily come to you, but you're worried that maybe their safety or overall health is in danger, how can you or should you intervene? That's a really good question.
I've gone through that before, so I'll try to speak to that. When I was, this was years and years ago, so I was best friends with this girl back in high school, and, her family didn't believe in therapy. So that wasn't really a resource I could point her to. Her mom her mom and dad wouldn't even really consider taking her. They believed, the church and talking to your pastor, that was the only real way to go. And so I, couldn't really refer her to that source, but she was hurting herself. And when she opened up to me finally about that, because I didn't know, when she finally told me about that, I was kind of in one of those situations where I was taking on too much than I could handle on a daily basis with her. I was basing my mental health on her recovery from her mental health issues, and she was getting worse. And I was just now I'm getting worse. And so it was kind of a breaking point for me when I realized, okay, I need to, number one, pray about my response here, because I kept trying to fix everything myself. I can't keep doing that. So I told her, you need to talk to your mom. Now. This can't continue. If you're hurting yourself, this is a serious issue. And I'm telling you right now, I'm keeping you accountable now. I'm taking the reins. She didn't even necessarily give me permission. We were best friends, but this is, now that we're best friends, that was clear. I was I am telling you right now, I didn't force her per se, but I was I am telling you right now, you need to go. As your best friend, I am not going to stop bothering you about this until you tell her, basically. So in a way, I was not necessarily giving her advice. I was kind of commanding her, you need to open up and tell your mom about this. Because I would have said go to therapy, but we were kind of too young for that kind of thing. The first step would have been to talk to her parents. And then if they wanted to do therapy after that, yeah. But now that we're all adults, I think if someone's hurting themselves or they're saying, I'm thinking about suicide and stuff like that, you can be forceful with them, and in a loving way. It's you want to be lovingly forceful, where that this is it's like a safety hazard. If somebody was just standing in the street, you would pull them out of the street. You wouldn't say, hey, maybe you should try to get out of out of the street. No, you'd go into the street, you'd grab them, pull them out of the street if there was oncoming traffic, because you don't want to see them get hurt. It's that kind of love, in my opinion. Yeah, and she didn't want to do it at all, but I I was like, you need to go do it. And so she finally did it, and she was happy that she did it because she never hurt herself again.
Yeah,
So,
sometimes desperate times do call for desperate measures. Sometimes it is worth sacrificing a friendship to save a friend. But it is really hard. I have often said you can't make good choices for other people. Sometimes you have to try, though. Sometimes you have to force them into situations.
The other thing that Adam alluded to earlier is reach the heck out. Reach out.
Yeah.
Reach out. If you have any inkling that something's going on, reach out. I didn't even know a guy, and the Lord put him in my heart. His parents had given me his name. I texted him, and he texted me back and said I was driving to the cliff to drive off. This is a stranger. I was driving to the cliff to drive off the cliff to kill myself. And I got your text, and I gave you some hope, and I called you, and we met. So you just don't know. You just don't know. But if you have an inkling, just just thinking about you, praying about how's it going, anything like that. Hey brother, love you. I just love to catch up with you because I'm worried about you. It means you just have no idea how much that means. Versus you didn't say anything, and then something happens, and you kick yourself.
I know the camp we do, we're part of in the summer, they give us like leaders kind of some guidelines for when, if you've got a student coming to you, when you need to take it to another level. And it's like, if it's something that's been going on for a long time versus a short-term sadness issue versus a long-term depression issue, if they have suicidal ideation, I don't know if you remember any of the other guidelines that they've given us, but it's like know as a friend or a mentor or whatever, know your limits.
Yeah.
I think
Recognize
the
your
trauma,
limits.
if you know what the trauma is, if
Right,
the trauma
right.
is rape, or the trauma is something extreme,
Yeah.
Know when you need to take
And-
it to somebody else who's
Yeah.
involved.
right?
When you're out of your depth. Yeah. Yeah.
And I just want to say for everyone here, if you're thinking, this is awesome, but unfortunately I just don't feel like I have the people to talk to, we're the people to talk to. We want to be those people for you. You don't get to have that excuse. We would love to talk to you. We want to reach out to you. We want to be reached out to.
We covered a lot of things. Hopefully there was stuff in here this morning that was applicable or useful for you or for people in your lives that you want to help and support and reach out to. I really appreciate you guys sharing your stories this morning. This is really hard, by the way, to get up and sit in front of a bunch of people and get really vulnerable. It's about something really, really personal and hard. So thank you guys so much for sharing. We really appreciate you guys. So I'm just going to close us out in prayer now. God, I just thank you so much for the ability that you give us sometimes to go through really hard things, to struggle really hard, to need you, to rely on you, to learn those skills and abilities, and then to be able to share those things with other people. God, I know that there are things that we are all currently struggling with, have struggled with, will struggle with, and God, you care about us in the midst of and in spite of, and sometimes because of those struggles. And God, we want to do the hard work of drawing closer to you and trying to understand and heal from injuries and traumas and issues that we've had in the past, God. And so I thank you for the group that we have here and the ability that we have to be honest with one another and vulnerable with one another and share things with each other, God. And I just pray that you would bless us in our attempts to do so and get healthy and be right there in the middle of the process with us and remind us not to shrink back into our shells, but that we can go to other people, that we can get help, that it does get better, it can get better. And relying on you and relying on one another are the ways in which we do that, God. In your name we pray. Amen. Amen.